Imagine an African army standing before a modern European force in the mountains of Ethiopia. The year was 1896. Across Africa, European powers were rapidly expanding their empires. Kingdoms and territories were falling one after another. But one country refused to be conquered: Ethiopia. And on March 1st, 1896, at a place called Adwa, Ethiopian forces delivered one of the most significant military defeats suffered by a European colonial power in Africa. But how did Ethiopia do it? How did Emperor Menelik II, Empress Taitu Betul, and an enormous Ethiopian army defeat Italy's invasion? This is the story of the Battle of Adwa. During the late 19th century, European powers were competing for territory across Africa. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and Italy were all expanding their influence. This period became known as the Scramble for Africa. Italy was one of the newer European colonial powers. It had already established control over parts of the Horn of Africa, including Eritrea. But Italy wanted more. Its next target was Ethiopia. Ethiopia was not an easy country to conquer. It had a long history, powerful regional rulers, difficult mountainous terrain, and a large population that could be mobilized for war. And at the center of this resistance stood Emperor Menelik II. Menelik II became Emperor of Ethiopia in 1889. He understood what was happening across Africa. European powers were using diplomacy, military technology, and political divisions to expand their empires. Menelik knew Ethiopia needed to modernize. He acquired modern firearms and ammunition from abroad and worked to strengthen the Ethiopian state. But diplomacy became increasingly dangerous. In 1889, Ethiopia and Italy signed the Treaty of Wuchale. The two sides later disagreed over the meaning of one of its provisions. Italy interpreted the treaty as giving it a form of control over Ethiopia's foreign relations. Menelik rejected that interpretation. The disagreement became a major source of tension. By 1895, the conflict had turned into open war. Italy invaded Ethiopia. Italy expected its military advantage to help secure victory. But Menelik responded with a massive mobilization. Messages traveled throughout the empire. Regional leaders brought soldiers. Farmers left their villages. Warriors traveled from distant parts of Ethiopia. The Ethiopian army assembled in enormous numbers. And this was not simply Menelik's army. It was a coalition of forces from different regions and communities. Among the important leaders were Ras Makonnen, Ras Alula, Ras Mengesha, and Ras Mikhail, alongside many other commanders. Menelik's wife, Empress Taitu Betul, also played an important political and strategic role during the crisis. The Ethiopian forces moved north toward the Italian army, and eventually, both sides reached the area around Adwa. Before sunrise on March 1st, 1896, the Ethiopian army prepared for battle. The terrain around Adwa was mountainous and difficult. For the Italians, the landscape would become a nightmare. The Italian commander, General Oreste Baratieri, had roughly 14,000 troops under his command, including Italian soldiers and locally recruited Eritrean troops. The Ethiopian force was far larger, although estimates vary considerably. Menelik's army had a huge numerical advantage, but numbers alone do not win battles. The Italian army had modern artillery and rifles. The Ethiopians had modern firearms too, but many also carried traditional weapons. The battle would depend on something more than technology. It would depend on command, terrain, coordination, and strategy. During the night, Italian forces moved toward positions they believed were strategically important. But the Italian army became separated across difficult terrain. Instead of facing one unified Ethiopian force, different Italian units found themselves isolated. As daylight came, Ethiopian forces attacked. The fighting became intense. Ethiopian commanders used the mountainous landscape to their advantage. Large Ethiopian formations surrounded and attacked Italian positions. Italian units struggled to coordinate with one another. The battle quickly turned against them. The Ethiopian forces kept applying pressure. Italian soldiers attempted to retreat, but the withdrawal became chaotic. Thousands were killed, wounded, or captured. The Ethiopian victory was decisive. For Italy, the defeat was catastrophic. For Ethiopia, it was a moment of extraordinary triumph. News of the Ethiopian victory spread rapidly. A European colonial power had suffered a major defeat at the hands of an African state. And this was happening during an era when European empires were expanding across most of the continent. The significance of Adwa went far beyond the battlefield. Italy was forced to negotiate. The Treaty of Addis Ababa, signed later in 1896, recognized Ethiopia's independence and ended the war. Ethiopia had defended its sovereignty, and the victory became a powerful symbol of African resistance to colonialism. So why did Ethiopia win? There was no single reason. First, numbers mattered. Menelik was able to mobilize a huge army. Second, Ethiopian commanders understood the local terrain. The mountains and valleys around Adwa made movement and communication difficult for the Italian forces. Third, Italy's command decisions proved disastrous. Its forces became separated, making coordinated action difficult. Fourth, Ethiopia was not completely technologically isolated. Menelik had obtained significant quantities of modern firearms and ammunition before the war. And finally, Ethiopia was able to mobilize around the defense of its independence. Adwa was therefore not simply a story of traditional weapons defeating modern weapons. It was a complex military victory involving mobilization, leadership, logistics, terrain, intelligence, weapons, and strategy. The Battle of Adwa became one of the defining moments in Ethiopian history. It also became a powerful symbol across Africa and among people of African descent around the world. At a time when European colonial rule was spreading across the continent, Ethiopia had successfully defended its independence against an invading European power. Menelik II became remembered as the emperor who helped preserve Ethiopian sovereignty. And Adwa became more than the name of a battlefield. It became a symbol of resistance, a symbol of independence, and a reminder that history does not always follow the path that the powerful expect. In 1896, Italy came to Ethiopia expecting conquest. Instead, it left defeated. And that is how Ethiopia defeated a European empire. This was Adwa. This was Ethiopia's victory. And this is one of the most remarkable stories in African history.